I'm very excited to be joined again by Steve Wyche here on the podcast. Gonna break down the Falcons at the midpoint of the season. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Oh, no, Will, thanks for having me. This is great. Always look forward to chatting with you, man.
Yeah, and you're somebody who I love to get insight from because you have so much insight on what's going on around the league, which I think helps bring such a unique perspective to the Falcons because we're here Falcons 24/7, right? So I think you're able to be that breath of fresh air, that kind of gut check of like, all right, I know you guys see it this way. Here's how maybe it really is in the big picture of how things are going in the league. So yeah, again, I'm really excited to get your thoughts on this team overall. But I want to start with your just lasting takeaways from the Chargers loss because felt like the Falcons had some real momentum, that they had
Yep.
an opportunity to kind of go above 500 for the first time since 2017, which is when I started working for the Falcons, which is insane. So, what are your lasting impressions from that game?
Look, how many times have we seen this season? This is about the third time where they've had a chance to close out a game and they couldn't do it. Or they've gotten themselves in situations to win a game late and couldn't do it, right? Tampa Bay,
Hmm.
couldn't do it. There was the call, but
Right.
there's that. There's, the game against the Saints, their opportunities, where they're able to do some things there. So this is kind of the ebb and flow. That game was tough. You saw
Mhm.
Taquan Grab picked up the fumble at the end and, lost the ball and the Chargers had an opportunity to win the ball game, which they did. But I just thought there were some opportunities late in the passing game that Marcus Mariota just didn't follow through with that could have got some points on the board. I'm sure when they watched the film, they're like, man, we just had too many chances to score touchdowns
Hmm.
and didn't do it, which again has been a kind of a common theme for this team, especially in crunch situations, because they're competitive enough to win all of these games, right? I love what the Falcons have become. I expected them to kind of be this team in terms of be an 8-win team, like right around 500 type of team, because I knew Arthur Smith was going to have them ready to compete. I just didn't know certain players were going to emerge like they did. Um, But I think this is going to kind of be a pattern of what we saw with the Chargers. They're going to be a tough out. Falcons should have probably put more points on the board early when it was still 10:30 a.m. Pacific time for the Chargers,
Yep.
and they failed to do so. Um, but it was a tough loss, but not one that they can't bounce back from Thursday night.
No, it's not devastating by any means, but it is frustrating, I think, because you saw signs of a team maybe learning how to put some teams away, especially on defense. The Seattle game, the Cleveland game, you have game winning interceptions in both of those. San Francisco, a fourth down stop that gets the offense back and really kind of limiting San Francisco's offense the entire second half there to then bounce back and have the Panthers game and then the Chargers game. And honestly, if the Panthers game goes differently, I mean, we're sitting here saying, wow, the Falcons went from kind of figuring out how to win these games to now three losses and now
Yeah,
you've got all those types of issues. But like you said, it is correctable. They're going to get a chance here really quickly to correct it on Thursday night on the road in Carolina. And what's interesting to me about this matchup, Steve, is that we've seen Atlanta's offense give teams fits mostly because of how kind of multiplicative it can be with how many variations off of the same look and how that creates headaches just mentally for all of the defensive players that have to look at what they're doing. But given the fact that they just saw Atlanta, the week before last, does that give Carolina any sort of edge defensively because they've got film exactly of what Atlanta did to them and it is very very fresh, or does all the coaching turnovers and the general upheaval going on in Carolina right now maybe kind of negate that and take that out the window? What's your read on this game?
I won't say it gives them an edge. I mean, like both teams are dealing with the same circumstance, right? They just played 2 weeks ago.
Hmm.
Um, Not even that long. So I would say it gives them an edge, but I mean they're familiar. Now it's really going to come down to execution, right? You're not Thursday night games. You're not going to necessarily out scheme a team because you're coming off of basically 3 walkthrough practices, and if
Hmm.
it's a division opponent, they already kind of know the principles of what you do. Like you said, they just experienced it, and you're probably not going to open up too much of the playbook of anything they haven't seen on film or had to guard against a couple weeks ago. And that's why I said execution is so important, right? You can't let DJ Moore get behind you on a Hail Mary
Right.
on something like that. But then you try to put them away, so it's not going to be that type of circumstance. But in all likelihood, it's going to be another 3-point type of game. Again, a division game on a short week. Carolina just got the hell kicked out of it by Cincinnati, whereas the Falcons were in another grinded out game. This is where the
Hmm.
Falcons just have to really kind of suck it up. Mariota's going to have to make some plays. I mean, he's just missing too many guys on too many throws, and there's opportunity to make some plays. The defense take advantage of what you see on film against Cincinnati. I mean, this
Yeah.
Carolina offense kind of really hit some snags, and the defense has played pretty well. Continue to grow and take advantage. Um, but everything still comes down to the run game, and getting Cordero Patterson back is huge. You saw just the aggressiveness and the style that he plays with, and how that kind of got Algier. Like, you're seeing Algier steadily
Yes.
understand what's wanted out of this run game, the patience it takes sometimes, or the aggression it takes sometimes. Seemed to take him a while to figure that out, but now he's kind of stepping into that dangerous in the screen game. And Caleb Huntley's just a big slab of beef. Um, that's hard for teams, to get a hold of. So not having Hennessy the center is a tough blow.
It is.
But I think they've got a certain mindset right now where every game you're going to get something from the Falcons that that you played a very physical game.
Do you think it's beneficial that because the Falcons' identity offensively is so tied up in the run game, and not that the run game is easier, because it's definitely not, but it may be a little less kind of involved in terms of the movement of like, I'm doing a bad job of phrasing it, but basically what I'm getting at is, because the Falcons' identity on offense is the run game, do you think that makes it a little bit easier on a short week when you don't have that time to really dig into a scheme and flesh out a full game plan? Like, can they just lean on this run game? And is that more effective for a short week than maybe other teams' game plans would be?
It's who they are. I mean, the Ravens run the hell out of the ball. Everyone knows what they're going to do, but you
They
can't
do.
stop it. Well, I won't say you don't know what they're going to do. You know what they're the basic tenets of what they are going to do, because they're so creative off of what they do. The Giants run the ball, right? So
Right.
why go to try to be creative on a short week and break your identity? Arthur Smith has built an identity with this team, and man, he can call some plays.
Yes, he can.
And for what he's been able to do with questionable personnel on this offensive line to come up with blocking schemes that are really hard to defend against, especially with the physicality that they play with. No, I mean, Carolina may know every play that the Falcons are going to run, but they got to stop it. And that's part of it. I mean, it's not that simple, because I do think Arthur Smith is pretty damn creative in what he's designed and the way they execute it, but it's going to be nothing extravagant. It is going to be steak and potatoes. Our guys are going to outplay your guys, and that's where execution will dictate whether Atlanta wins this game.
Well, they better be able to execute, I think, a little bit better than they did down the stretch on Sunday. But that's what the NFL is now in 2022. It's who can execute down the stretch, and in the big situational moments with the details. So we will look forward to that on Thursday. But Steve, I just want to now kind of pull out, get a macro view of this team. You mentioned that you thought that this could be a 7-8 win team, kind of around 500 going into the season. That prediction's looking great right now. So I'm curious, is this the path that you thought that they would take to kind of be in the mix at this time of the year?
Here's where they surprised me. I thought they were going to get bludgeoned in their first 7 games. Right? You look at
Hmm.
that schedule before the season, you're like, geez, like
Right.
this is a rough stretch for like the best of teams, right? And they came out where they did. I mean, they were right around 500. I think they were 4-4 when they came out of the first 8, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to have that type of record, I'm like, all right. Which is why, to me, like, that loss to the Chargers, in Atlanta was like a tough one to swallow.
It was. It really was. Yeah.
Because if you go 5-4, looking at the next stretch of games, you have a legit shot. You have put yourself in a position to get double-digit wins and possibly win the division, right? So I think with the way their schedule lays out, after this game, you get kind of the mini bye. Tampa's no gangbusters, right? They should have won the first time. you know,
Hmm.
the Saints, I think they've already played twice, correct?
No, they've got the Saints one more, but it's
Okay.
back like they're like the last two games are like Saints and Bucks.
Okay. Okay. So now you've got a bunch of, non-divisional games where you've got opportunities. And so again, the way that they finish those first 7 or 8 games is surprising, and I don't think we should be surprised at all if they finish on the plus side of 500 and they're in the playoff conversation all the way up until the end.
And that's where, because when we looked at it before the year starts, when you get the schedule release, and the NFL has done such a great job of eventizing every little kind of administrative act of their offseason. But yeah, it was the first 7 games were the massive standout, and it was like, this is brutal. The season's going to kind of be over before it even gets a chance to start here in Atlanta. But they did a great job of making sure that didn't happen. And now the bye week. They haven't had a bye week yet. The bye week's not until week
Right.
14. That could
Right.
be a huge asset. Where beforehand we were looking at that as, man, they don't even get a break from just the slog that they've got. They made it through. Now they've got a long week after Thursday, another bye week. If they can kind of do what they're supposed to do here, they could make noise kind of in the playoffs, or at least be a team mentioned as, hey, they could be frisky on that first weekend or second weekend if they can get there.
Yeah. I mean, no question. You look at the status of the division, you look at the status of the NFC. I mean, this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the Eagles, the Vikings, the Cowboys. You got to put the 49ers in there and the Seahawks in there. But other than the Eagles, anybody really making you say, God, it's a dominant team. You don't want to mess with them?
Yeah.
So there's no reason where the fact that Atlanta came through the first half of the season the way it did, there's no reason that that they can't withstand. I mean, look, they've done a lot of this without AJ Terrell. They did a lot of it without
Mm-hmm.
Cordell Patterson. Um, they've had some injuries, not devastating injuries, but they've had some injuries that have handicapped them. But you look at the way the defensive front is played. You look at that offensive line is played. We're talking about how garbage they were. I mean, and
Yeah.
they've played damn well. So that's what I'm saying. What Arthur Smith has done and helped formulating an identity is to where here's Caleb McGarry, the right tackle, who they don't pick up his option, and he's playing his ass off, right? He's playing fantastic football.
Yes, he is.
Um, the running backs, Drake London is real. You have a guy
Mm-hmm.
like Olamide Zacchaeus who shows up every darn game. Um, I do wish they could find a better way to use Kyle Pitts. I mean, I know it's kind of the fantasy football, drudgery, but I'm looking at some of these teams, Seattle with some of their 3 tight end stuff, Baltimore, some of the 3 tight end stuff that they do to get their tight ends open, San
Yep.
Francisco with some double tight end stuff. He is a weapon that needs to be, utilized much more to open up this offense. And so what if you have to keep him to protect from time to time when you don't? I think he's somebody who, over the second half of the season, they have got to find a way to unleash because he's that talented.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that if you're kind of making a list of the biggest disappointments, I guess, at this point in the year, Kyle Pitts' production, or at least involvement in the passing offense as a receiver, is right up there, because it's just so much fun to
Yes.
watch this guy with the ball in his hands, right? And to watch him even be near the ball, to see him, because he can do the stuff that like a Julio Jones can do, that Calvin Johnson could do, that the most athletic people at this position or in the NFL can do. And I think everybody just wishes they could see it, more often, for selfish reasons, of course. And the Falcons are using him in ways that help them win football games, which is more important, I think, to Arthur Smith and this team. But yeah, selfishly, like you say, we just want to see Kyle Pitts ball out. So if that's number one on the list, are there any other things that you expected to see or were excited to see coming into the year that maybe you haven't seen yet so far, and are a little disappointed to have not seen it?
Yeah, I mean, now we're nitpicking. Um, I'd like to see Marcus Mariota be a little bit more consistent in the passing game. I mean, he's been so
Hmm.
fantastic leading this team and running and doing some things to the offense, but man, he misses some throws sometimes where you're like, "Come on, dude. This is a
Yeah.
layup here for you. You got to hit it." So, I mean, that's part of it. I do think, defensively, they've got to be more consistent on the back end. They've allowed too many explosive plays, but um, other than that, Will, I think what they've done front seven defensively has been, very, very impressive with some of the, where the young people like Arnold Ebiketie have come around. Grady Jarrett's been
Yep.
awesome. But I really can't sit there and say, this team's got a ton of shortcomings other than overall top shelf talent.
Yeah, so Steve, we talked a little bit about the disappointments, but I want to talk about the surprises of the year. And I know one of mine coming into the second year of Arthur Smith, Terry Fondo's regime, somebody who I really wanted to see take that next step forward was Richie Grant. And so coming into training camp, seeing him working with Jalen Hawkins on the back end, the secondary was a lot of fun. I know that was a big buzz around training camp, kind of all of us talking about the new incoming blood in that group and how invigorating it was. And he's picked that up and carried it on to the regular season. An interception again last week. I mentioned the one to seal the win against Seattle. What has been your impression of not only Richie Grant, but then any other kind of surprise things that you didn't expect to see from this team, but have loved to see this fall?
Well, you could see Richie Grant in training camp that it clicked,
Yep.
right? I mean, the aggression he was playing with, he was playing so much faster. He wasn't thinking as much. He was playing football. Um, and like you said, just the safeties have been excellent. Isaiah Oliver coming back from the knee injury and
Yeah.
playing like he has.
He played well last
Just,
week.
he's played well since he's come back. He's had really good games. D. Alford, I know he was nicked a little bit, but him at nickel. Um, again, Arnold Ebiketie, I mean, you could see it in training camp, like, all right, this guy, he can win, right? He's somebody on passing downs where he can win and get to the quarterback. Like I
When do you
mentioned
think
earlier,
we're
great.
gonna start seeing? Sorry, Steve, but when do you think we're gonna start seeing some of the hurries and the pressures kind of converted into sacks for Abikady? Does he need another guy on the other side? Is that kind of what he's missing, or do you think it'll just come
It's
eventually?
it's hard because sacks are, you always hear about guys want to affect the quarterback, and he affects the quarterback.
Yes.
Um, so a lot of it could be depending on what they do. If Malone, he's shown some flashes. If he can come in and do some things, that would help as well. But also, getting a sack is hard, and you have to learn to do it because a
Yeah.
quarterback could be right here and you're within a foot away from him and the ball's out, right?
Hmm.
And so he's got to learn how to close in certain ways. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. Like, when you see Nick Bosa, the ground he covers when he smells it is amazing, right? And that's where, someone like Ebiketie is got to kind of learn a little bit of that, but it's all in the moment of the game. And again, how quick the quarterback is releasing it, because Grady Jarrett's on him so quick most of the time.
Yep.
It's hard to get sacks. And so it'll happen. It'll happen the way he's affecting the quarterback, but he's a player, man. I just think, I mean, Rashaan Evans has been such a bright surprise at inside linebacker coming in. You thought this was a guy who was just someone who was friendly with Arthur Smith and he was going to just show up and play. And he's been so good
Hmm.
at what he's done. I tell you, Drake London, I don't know if I've seen him drop a pass. That guy is like so good. He makes a tough catch, just gets right up and plays football. Um, I love the running backs. I mean, Caleb Huntley, who saw that coming? He looked good in preseason, but he's going
Yep.
against third stringers, and he's just taking advantage of his opportunities. And now you've got this great three-man rotation with Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier, and Huntley. All bring different things, but the one constant they bring is the physicality.
Hmm.
Right? Again, if you're a safety or something, you got to tackle one of those guys. You better strap it up. And just seeing that, being on a football field, seeing your running back deliver like they finish runs and adhere to the style that Arthur Smith wants to play, that's a beautiful thing, man, because it's a passing league, right? But what are we saying about all the teams that are winning right now? They're running the football.
Hmm.
Even a team like the Jets, they lose Brees Hall, but they come out last week against the Bills and they're hammering them with some runs.
Yeah.
Um, it's just part of the game now where these teams are playing lighter linebackers or they're using a safety as someone to come down. These running backs, man, the ones who finish and the ones who, when it gets to the fourth quarter, make guys start making business decisions. That's what the Falcons running backs are doing, man. That's why they got to use different ways and get some leads to finish games like the way the running backs are finishing runs. Um, so they can, pull out more and more of these close games that they're in.
Yeah, I mean, Ovi and I were talking about this on Sunday. It looks like the 2008 through 2010 version of the Falcons, right? I mean, it looks like the Mike Mularkey, Ovi Mihaly, Michael Turner, and I mean, I think this is the first season since 2008 that they have had 3 games with over 200 rushing yards at this point in the season. So yeah, I mean, what they're doing on the ground is amazing. And Damian Williams belongs on kind of my disappointments list because I wanted to see him because I think
Yeah,
that
it's a good.
he would add such an element to this offense that's not there right now is kind of what they have tried to get Avery Williams, I think, to be a little bit. But Damian Williams is just that veteran who's done it a million times. And that's where I'm excited to see hopefully return soon from that rib injury. But a couple more here before I let you go. Steve, what trends do you expect to continue from the first half into the second half for Atlanta?
Well, I mean, I think their defense is going to continue to get better. I mean, I think guys are still grasping some of the stuff Dean Pease is asking them to do, but if AJ Terrell comes back, in the next couple of weeks, they've got a lot of depth in that secondary, so they'll be
They
able to
do.
play maybe some schemes to a lot of different players. Um, the other trend is I think you're going to continue to see these inside linebackers thrive. I mean, man, these guys are playing so well. Michael Walker,
Hmm.
like I said, Rashad Evans, Anderson when he's getting in there is playing pretty well. But I just think the overall trend is just the mindset. Like now they can smell success. When you're going on 2 and 3 game losing streaks, you start to lose your confidence and doubt yourself. Well, that hasn't happened. And they see what's out there and they see how well they've played against some really good football teams. Like, okay, it like our coach wasn't lying to us. Like we see what all this is was is it worth it? We see in it.
Hmm.
Um, I think the biggest question that Falcons fans, when I look at all their comments and stuff, is are we going to see Desmond Ritter? And I think right now, no, we're not going to see him because they're in contention. So unless Marcus gets hurt, it might be next year before you see Desmond Ritter on the field because Mariota, as he's not great, but some of these running lanes they're getting offensively are because of his mobility and some of the things he's doing in the run game. So we'll see if we see Ritter at any point, but I can't see it unless Marcus has an injury.
You kind of preempted one of my questions there. Of course, I had to ask
Oh,
about the
sorry about
quarterback
that.
situation. No, 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 but that's great because that frees me up to just go one more for you. What do the Falcons have to do to make the playoffs to actually actualize and realize the goal that they have started now by playing so well through the really rough stretch? Everything's in front of them. What do they have to do to bring it home?
Score touchdowns when they're kicking field goals. Not all the time, but I mean, good God, like I said, there's just too many times when there's an errant throw with a receiver open or a
Hmm.
penalty which takes them, from 2nd and 5 to 2nd and 15. A lot of teams go through that, but they don't have that margin for error, right? Just because they don't have the passing game where you can just zip it right in there like Buffalo can or like the Chiefs can. Um, they've got to string together. You've got to go on a 2 or 3 game win streak,
Yep.
right? You've got to be like, this is where we are rocking right now. And every
Hmm.
week it's like, okay, we're good. Oh, we took a step back. We're good. We
Yeah.
took a
For as
step back.
consistent as they've been, they haven't done it consistently.
Correct. Correct. And I mean, again, you're starting to see teams, it's early, but you're starting to see some of these teams like the Ravens, like, okay, we're finding our way.
Yep.
The Bengals were doing it before they got shellacked a couple weeks ago, but you saw them come back against the Panthers. Like, this is who we are. Let's get
Hmm.
rocking and rolling. So, those teams that have identities, right? What's amazing is so many teams in the NFL offensively are still trying to find their identities right now, in part because defenses have caught up in a lot of elements. But
Hmm.
we know what the Falcons are, we know who they are. Win the close games now, right? They're not a high turnover team. So do the little things and win these games. Put points on the board. If you got dogs on your team, start barking a little more loudly. Start biting a little bit harder in these situations where you've got to get 2 yards. You need to get them. If you're that dude, be a dude. And I think now the learning time is over because they've kind of staked who they are. It's time to go out and show it.
Well, Steve, you are that dude, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today and talk a little Falcons football. Everybody, please follow Steve Wyche on Twitter at Wyche89. Find all of his great stuff. with the NFL Network and everywhere he does all his great work. Steve, thank you again so much for coming on.
Appreciate you, Will.